Romans chapter 9, verses 1 through 12. We're returning to the theme that we began with in chapter 1, the question of Jews, Gentiles, and identity. If you recall, Paul is addressing a very specific issue for a very specific church. The Roman church is divided between Jews and Gentiles. Christianity was initially understood as the truest and fullest form and expression of Judaism. And the Gentiles were welcome and allowed to come, but they will be seen as guests of the Jews, people that came lately. And the Jews, if you recall, were then exiled from the city of Rome, and the Gentiles were the only Christians left. So that's just how it was until the Jews returned. And so we have this church divided along ethnic lines. Now, God promised that he would bless the descendants of Abraham, the Jews, and he would save them and use them, the Jews, to save the world. This was a Jewish religion. However, it appears that by and large, the Jews are not in overwhelming numbers embracing the message of Christ. Rather, the Gentiles are becoming Christ followers, and the Jews are diminishing. This really upsets Paul. He writes that he has, quote, he has great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart, end quote. Now, this situation is clearly killing him. The ethnic Jews are declining, and the Gentiles are taking over. And Paul is emphatic about this. He's not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. He says that if he could go to hell and in exchange make all the Jews become Christians, he would. I mean, Paul wants to save his people, his blood, his race. But he can't. I mean, no matter how hard he tries, and no one's trying harder than Paul. I mean, this is Paul after all. And the Jews are not converting en masse as he expected, as some of the Christians expected. This is killing Paul. He's tortured. And I think what we see in this passage is really amazing. It's like you see Paul working out these issues in real time. He's transforming himself while he's writing and coming to a new understanding. Like the Jews are the chosen people, and they are his people. And God promised over and over again in the Old Testament that they, the Jews, are his covenant people, but they're not converting. Okay, so what's going on? Through Paul's anguish and confusion, he gets a new insight, and this new insight is foundational to our Christian faith. Not all genetically, biologically, or racially Jews are in the covenant or under the grace of God. And there are people who are not genetically, biologically, or racially Jews who are in the covenant. Think about Rahab the prostitute, or Moses' wife Zephora, or Ruth from the book of Ruth, who was a Moabite. And Ruth is in the family tree that leads to David. God has a long history of absorbing Gentile people into his covenant. And again, not every Jew is in the covenant. Some wandered away. Many were sinful. Many were idolators. They were sinful and they went away. And again, there are Jews who are actually in the covenant. So this is what Paul is saying. It's not based on race, ethnicity, biology, or lineage. It's about faith. It's about who God brings into his church, and he will select who he will bring into this church, who is going to be in the covenant. It's not based on genetics or biology or race. And so you're thinking, this does not sound that earth-shattering. All sorts of people become Christians, or other religions for that matter. It's not really based on race. Okay, well, we think that in the 21st century because of what Paul is doing right here. And what Paul is doing here, actually, in this context, is not normal. In this context, this was radical. Because people are tribal. We are divided up into tribes, and we live in tribes. We are not just generic human beings. We're particular types of human beings. We're Italians, Irish, or Koreans. And what makes you that particular type? What makes you that ethnicity or that ethnos? Well, historically, what makes you a particular kind of ethnic group is land, history, language, or food. And the big one, religion. Religion is huge historically in making people tribal or ethnic or in a certain group of people. Every tribe or ethnicity has had their own particular religion. Your particular religion is what made your group distinct, special, different from everyone else. Religion has been powerful glue that holds your society together. It makes you loyal to one another. But it's also that thing that keeps you separate from everyone else. We're loyal to our in-group because we have our own religion, and we hate those people because they have a different religion. Loyalty, ethnicity, and tribalism, religion is a powerful glue that holds that together. That's how it's always been historically. Now, Paul is saying something radical. Christianity, this new religion he's trying to spread, or this new old religion, Judaism, Christianity now, is not about bloodlines. It's not about ethnicities. God is subverting everything that's been before. It's subverting all our expectations. God is adopting the entire world into this covenant, and it's not based on bloodlines. It's not based on race. It's not based on tribes. Now, in the 21st century, we are a lot less tribal. We still kind of are, but a lot less tribal, and we are that way thanks in large part to what Paul is doing here. So is this relevant to us? We are post-tribal, after all. And tribalism was about rooting your identity in your ethnos. But in the modern world, we actually build our own identities. We are building them every day. In spite of your past, your parents, your family, you can study hard, choose your university, go to a university and choose your major, choose and build your job, your career, be in a career for 10 years and switch gears and do another entire career. You can live in one city for a while and after a few years, move to another city because you want to, make new friends, make a new identity. You can buy things, buy clothes, buy a car, buy a house. And in purchasing and buying things, we change the way we look and we create a new identity. We can choose to join different clubs, different environments. The modern person can transcend his or her identity and create a new identity based on personal preference or what you desire. And we put a lot of value into the identities we create for ourselves because it gives us freedom, autonomy, and frankly, a lot of times the identities we make ourselves are really hard. We put a lot of years and effort and study and money into the identities that we make for ourselves, we craft for ourselves. We value that. We value our freedom and our ability to be makers of ourselves. But Paul is saying something else. Your identity, your value, your worth, it's not what you make. Your identity, your value, your worth, it's what God creates. Your significance is actually what God gives you. It's a gift from God. It's not what you make for yourself. It's what God gives you. This passage is really, really radical. To the ancient world, this passage says that your identity and value is not based on your tribe. It's subverting all conventions that people have ever had. To we modern people in this modern world, this passage is saying that your identity and value is not based on what you're creating for yourself with all your work and effort. Autonomy and self-creation, that is foundational to our modern world. Modern people worship the idea of self-creation. Paul is offering us an entirely different way of understanding ourselves. We have a new identity, and that's based on what God gives us. It's a God-created identity.